My name is Alex, and my day job involves making sure the digital scaffolding of modern society doesn't collapse. I'm a senior network architect for the state, a title so vague it sounds made up, but it basically means I'm a highly paid plumber for the internet. When the government's digital pipes get clogged with cat videos or Russian hackers, I'm the guy they call to snake the drain. My secret weapon isn't a plunger, though. It's root access. The two most beautiful words in the English language. My story, however, doesn't start in a sterile, state-run data center. It starts in the humid, chaotic theater of war that was my garage, with a 7-foot-tall monument to my own terrible judgment. "Just tilt it," I said, for what felt like the 17th time. "If you angle the base in first, the top should clear the frame." Dave, a contractor whose face was a permanent roadmap of skepticism, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a gritty hand. "Alex, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've installed bathtubs on the 3rd floor and pianos in basements. I know geometry. And geometry, my friend, is telling me you need a bigger door." His apprentice, Kevin, a kid whose boundless enthusiasm was matched only by his complete lack of object permanence, nodded sagely. "The physics are fighting us, man. It's like inertia." "Kevin, we're not trying to achieve escape velocity. We're trying to fit a metal box through a hole," I sighed. "Physics is a suggestion. Marketing is what got this thing delivered with a guaranteed to fit sticker on the side. We just need to find the loophole in its physical contract with the universe." The box in question was a 42U server rack. For the uninitiated, imagine a refrigerator built for a family of giants, stripped of all its charm and purpose, and designed to hold a metric ton of blinking, heat-generating computer equipment. It was the keystone of my glorious and monumentally excessive home lab project. My wife called it the Power Bill Multiplier. I called it the Ark of the Covenant, and right now, it was wedged at a 45-degree angle in my garage door frame, groaning like a dying whale. "Loophole's gonna be taking the door clean off the hinges. Again," Dave grumbled, pulling a crowbar from his belt. "That's another $50 for the labor." "Dave, my man, bill me $100. At this point, another $50 is just a rounding error in the invoice for the marital counseling I'll need when my wife sees the final bill for this whole project. Just get it inside." With a grunt, Dave applied the crowbar. There was a splintering crack, followed by the screech of metal on painted wood that could peel enamel from your teeth. The rack shuddered, scraped, and then, with a final deafening thump, it was inside. We stood there for a moment, panting in the sudden silence, admiring our handiwork. The doorframe looked like it had been chewed on by a beaver. And that's when we heard it. "Excuse me, excuse me." The voice was a high-pitched nail on the chalkboard of suburban tranquility. We turned. There, on the edge of my driveway, stood Carol. To say Carol was the HOA president was an understatement. She was the HOA. She was a walking, talking embodiment of Section 7, Paragraph C, which probably dictated the legally permissible hue of petunias. She was in her late 50s, clad in a blindingly white tennis outfit that looked less like sportswear and more like the ceremonial armor of a militant tennis cult. Her face was pinched in a permanent state of disapproval, and she was holding her smartphone up, recording us as if we were criminals defacing a national monument. "What is the meaning of this racket?" she demanded, marching onto my driveway. Her sneakers didn't dare make a sound on the concrete. "And is that industrial equipment?" She pointed a trembling, perfectly manicured finger at the server rack. I felt the familiar urge to just lie down on the oily floor and let the world wash over me, but I was a homeowner, a taxpayer, a father. I had responsibilities. I plastered on the customer service smile I reserved for state senators and people who thought Wi-Fi was delivered by tiny, invisible birds. "Morning, Carol. Just a bit of home improvement," I chirped, stepping in front of the rack as if to hide its shame. "That is not a home improvement, Alex," she snapped, craning her neck to see around me. "That is a commercial-grade server chassis. Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 3 of the Harmony Creek Homeowners Association covenants explicitly and without ambiguity forbids the operation of a commercial enterprise from a residential property." She recited the covenant number from memory. Of course she did. She probably recited HOA bylaws in her sleep. "Oh, this," I patted the cold black metal. This isn't for a business. Heavens no. It's for my very advanced smart home system. Dave coughed to stifle a laugh. Kevin just looked confused. You know, I continued, warming to the lie. Controlling the lights, the thermostat, the toaster. It's a very, very sensitive toaster. Needs a lot of conditioning. Carol's eyes narrowed into slits. She took 2 steps closer, her gaze sweeping over the towering black cabinet. That looks bigger than my refrigerator. It's a European model, I said smoothly. Very efficient. Saves on electricity in the long run. The HOA is all about green initiatives, right? I thought the appeal to a buzzword might work. It did not. I am documenting this, she announced, taking another picture with a decisive snap of her phone. Her glare was so intense I felt like my lawn was about to get a citation for being too green. She then turned that withering gaze on Dave and Kevin. And this noise is completely unacceptable. It is 10:30 a.m. My poodle, Prince Flufferton III, is having his government-mandated afternoon meditation. Ma'am, Dave began, his patience visibly fraying. There's no such thing as a government-mandated poodle meditation. Carol ignored him completely. The board will be hearing about your toaster, Alex. Mark my words. She spun on her heel and marched away, her white sneakers practically radiating righteous indignation. We watched her go. Prince Flufferton III, who I could now see sitting in her pristine window, was a fluffy white creature that looked less like a dog and more like a sentient cotton ball with anxiety. Dave finally broke the silence. He shook his head slowly, a weary expression on his face. Buddy, he said, his voice low and solemn. You got a grade A, top shelf, organically sourced Karen on your hands. I let out a long, slow breath. Dave, you have no idea. Last spring she tried to fine me because my recycling bin was, and I quote, a shade of blue inconsistent with municipal standards and disruptive to the neighborhood's color palette. Kevin's eyes went wide. For real? For real, I confirmed. I had to show her a signed letter from the sanitation department confirming that all their bins were, in fact, blue. It was a whole thing. Dave just stared at the empty space where Carol had been, then back at the monstrous server rack that now occupied my garage. Good luck, kid, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. You're gonna need it. I just sighed. He was right. And my gut, the same one that told me when a network switch in a forgotten government basement was about to die, told me this was only the beginning. The next morning, the air in our house was thick with the kind of tension only standardized testing can produce. It was a Tuesday, which had somehow been designated as the day the fate of America's educational future would be decided by 10-year-olds filling in bubbles with number 2 pencils. There are 3 things that strike fear into the heart of a modern parent, I narrated to myself as I poured coffee, watching the domestic drama unfold at the kitchen table. 1. A sudden inexplicable fever the night before, a non-refundable vacation. 2. The phrase, I'm bored exactly 47 minutes into a 6-hour road trip. And 3. The soul-crushing, joy-sucking black hole of dread known as standardized testing week. My wife, Sarah, a woman who could organize a 3-ring circus with a single spreadsheet, was in full drill sergeant mode. My daughter, Lily, a brilliant, funny kid who was currently staring at her oatmeal as if it held the secrets to the universe, was the nervous recruit. Okay, honey, focus, Sarah said, her voice a blend of encouragement and desperation. If a train leaves Chicago at 3:00 p.m. traveling west at 60 miles per hour, and another train leaves New York at 1:00 p.m. traveling west at 80 miles per hour, at what point will they? Lily looked up, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Mom, why can't they just check the train schedule on their phones? Or, use Google Maps? It tells you. I nearly choked on my coffee. She's not wrong, honey, I managed, wiping my mouth. The real-world problem here is that they're still using trains as a primary mode of cross-country transportation in this hypothetical scenario. It's an infrastructure issue. Sarah shot me a look that could melt steel. Alex, not helping. Right. My bad. I gave Lily a wink. Focus up, kiddo. The future of your permanent 3rd grade record hangs in the balance. Remember to bubble in your name correctly. Honestly, that's 50% of the battle. After Lily and Sarah left for the school walking on eggshells, as if any sudden movement might dislodge a critical math fact from Lily's brain, I headed into my sanctuary. My home office. If the garage was a testament to chaotic ambition, my office was the opposite. It was a sleek, climate-controlled command center. One wall was dominated by 3 massive monitors, currently displaying a series of intricate network topography maps, scrolling logs, and performance graphs. It was the digital nervous system of the entire state, laid bare in glowing lines and pulsing icons. "Welcome to the digital throne room," I muttered, sinking into my ergonomic chair. From here, I watch over the state's most critical data flows: power grids, DMV databases, 911 dispatch centers, and most importantly on this particular Tuesday, the fragile digital pipe that connects thousands of terrified bubble-filling 10-year-olds to a server farm in the state capital. My job, in essence, was to make sure the data flowed, no matter what. I did my morning diagnostic, a routine I'd performed thousands of times. Everything was green, network latency was minimal, packet loss was 0. The digital highway to Lily's school was wide open. I sent her a quick good luck text, leaned back, and joined a mind-numbingly dull conference call. A state senator was trying, for the 10th time, to understand cloud computing by using a series of tubes analogy he'd clearly picked up in 2006. "So, the data goes into the tube," he was saying, his voice tinny through my headset. "But what if the tube gets full?" I muted my mic. This was going to be a long day. The call droned on. I was half listening, half optimizing a firewall rule set, when a text from Dave lit up my phone screen. "Dave, code red. The Dragon Lady is here. And she brought the fluff ball." I sighed. A deep, weary sigh that came from the very depths of my soul. I unmuted my mic. "Senator, I have a critical infrastructure situation I need to deal with. I'll have to circle back with you on the tube fullness issue." I didn't wait for a response. I walked to the front window and peered out. Sure enough, there she was. Carol, standing on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, glaring at my house. Prince Flufferton III was at her feet, yapping with the furious intensity of a tiny, fluffy alarm system. Dave and Kevin, who were prepping the garage exterior for its HOA-approved coat of grage of my dreams, had stopped work and were standing there, looking like they were facing a firing squad. They had a small radio playing classic rock at a volume that wouldn't disturb a sleeping kitten. I headed outside, forcing my face into a neutral, non-confrontational expression. "This is simply unacceptable," Carol's voice cut through the air as I approached. "The decibel level of this noise pollution, is in clear violation of the 10 a.m. Serenity mandate." Dave, to his credit, just looked confused. "Ma'am, first, it's Tom Petty. That's not noise pollution, that's a national treasure. Second, there's no such thing as a Serenity mandate. It's an unwritten rule among civilized people," she shot back. Furthermore, she pointed a trembling finger at Dave's slightly muddy Ford F-150. "The color of your work vehicle is a visual blight on our community. It's giving me a migraine." "It's brown, ma'am," Kevin offered helpfully. "Like the color of dirt." This was clearly the wrong thing to say. Carol looked as if he'd just insulted her entire lineage. That's when I stepped in. "Carol, is there a problem?" I asked, my voice as mild as I could make it. "The men are working. They have a permit. The paint is HOA, approved color number 74B. The truck is legally parked on the street." "It's the principle of the matter, Alex," she seethed, turning her fury on me. "The constant disruption. First, you tried to install an industrial factory in your garage, and now this. It's affecting the entire neighborhood's tranquility. Some of us are trying to maintain a certain standard here." "The standard of absolute soul-crushing silence?" I asked, a bit of my natural snark leaking through. "I'm pretty sure that's reserved for libraries and cemeteries, Carol. This is a neighborhood. People live here. Sometimes they even paint things." My attempt at reason was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Her face went from pinch to puce. Her eyes, which I'd always thought of as beady, now seemed to burn with an unholy light. "You and your projects are a menace," she hissed, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper that was far more menacing than her shouting. "You think you're so clever with your technicalities and your smart remarks. You'll see." She leaned in slightly. "Some things can be disrupted far more easily than you think." She straightened up, gave a sharp tug on Prince Flufferton's leash, and marched back across her pristine lawn, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. I just stood there. Okay, that was weird, and weirdly specific. It had the cadence of an HOA complaint, but the undertones of a Bond villain's monologue right before he reveals the giant laser. I tried to file it away under the mental category of Carol being Carol, but a little red flag, the kind that usually precedes a catastrophic system failure on my monitors, started waving in the back of my mind. Kevin broke the silence. "Dude," he said, his eyes wide. "She's totally gonna slash your tires." I laughed, trying to brush it off. "Nah, Kevin. She's not a tire slasher. She's a report your grass for being a quarter-inch too tall kind of evil." I walked back to my office, the unease sticking to me like humidity. I wish I had listened to my gut, because as it turned out, I had gravely underestimated the depths of her evil. An hour later, I was deep in the zone, wrestling with a particularly stubborn piece of legacy code from the Department of Agriculture. The senator and his tubes were a distant memory. The world had shrunk to the glowing text on my screen. Then, my phone buzzed with a sharp, insistent vibration against my desk. I glanced at it. It was a push notification from the school district. The header was in all caps. Urgent. All schools in the district are currently experiencing a system-wide network outage. State testing is suspended. Updates to follow. My blood ran cold. Before I could even process the words, a second thing happened. The entire right-hand monitor of my three-screen setup, the one displaying the network topography for my local region, erupted in a blaze of angry red icons. An entire network segment hadn't just slowed down, it had gone dark, it had ceased to exist. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. I pulled up the primary alert log. Error. Catastrophic signal loss. Node 734. B. I cross-referenced the node ID with the regional map. 734B, the fiber optic junction box that served a 4-block radius. The 4-block radius that just so happened to include my house, my street, and, most critically, Northwood Elementary School. This wasn't a server crash. This wasn't a software bug or a DNS issue. This was a hard disconnect, the digital equivalent of a bridge being blown up. The little red icon on my screen wasn't an error message. It was a digital scream. My desk phone rang, shrill and demanding. I knew who it was before I even saw the caller ID. I snatched it up. "Alex!" Sarah's voice was a frantic torrent of words. "The internet's out! The entire school is down!" They just made an announcement. The tests are all frozen on the screens. The kids are freaking out. Lily is probably having a complete meltdown. What is going on? "I know," I said, my voice sharp and focused, all traces of my earlier laziness gone. I was already typing, pulling up deeper diagnostics. "I'm looking at it right now. Sarah, this wasn't an accident. This is a physical cut. Someone did this on purpose." "What? A physical cut? Who would do that?" And then it hit me. A memory, crystal clear. The image of Carol, her face twisted in rage, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "Some things can be disrupted far more easily than you think." "No," I whispered to myself. "It couldn't be. That's insane. That's felony-level insane." But the location of the dead node was a cold, hard fact. Node 734B. The ugly green metal utility box located on the public easement at the corner of Elm and Maple. The ugly green metal utility box located 10 feet from Carol's prize-winning petunia bed. "Sarah," I said into the phone, my mind already racing, calculating, formulating a plan. "I have to go. I think I can fix this." "Fix it? How? Are they sending a repair crew?" "A crew will take hours," I said, my fingers already flying. I've got a better idea. I hung up the phone. Okay. Deep breath. Don't panic. Panic is for end users. Panic is for people who don't have root access to the entire state's internet backbone. I was not one of those people. I was a network god, at least within the confines of this specific digital universe, and it was time to work a miracle. 5 minutes. That's all the time I had in my head. I wanted to fix this before the school officially canceled testing for the day, before Lily had time to go from anxious to full-blown panic attack. My fingers became a blur. This wasn't work anymore. It was an art form. It was a high-speed, high-stakes ballet of command lines and authentication keys. Minute 1. Triage and confirmation. Okay, Alex, I muttered, the words a low, steady rhythm. Talk it out. What do we have? My eyes scanned the logs. The junction box hadn't just lost its signal. The log showed a manual service disconnect event logged 2.3 seconds before the catastrophic signal loss. That wasn't a squirrel chewing through a wire. That wasn't a backhoe digging where it shouldn't. That was a human being, with a key, opening that box and physically yanking the plug. Confirmation, I whispered. This was deliberate. This was sabotage. My suspicion about Carol hardened into near certainty. Minute 2. The search for a detour. I couldn't magically repair a severed fiber optic cable from my office. But the digital world, like the real one, is full of back roads and forgotten highways. No time to dispatch a crew. That takes hours, best case. We need a workaround, a patch, a big, fat, data-slinging Band-Aid, and we need it now. I pulled up the state-level fiber map, a spiderweb of glowing lines overlaying a satellite image of the region. The school, and my entire neighborhood, was on a primary public network, trunk the main road, so to speak. It was dead. But my eyes darted a few streets over. There it was. A thicker, fainter line, designated GovCon Trunk 3. The continuity line, I breathed. It was a glorious thing of beauty. A massive multi-gigabit pipe of dark fiber installed years ago for disaster recovery. It was part of a state and federal initiative to ensure government operations could continue in the event of, say, an earthquake, a massive flood, or a zombie apocalypse. It sat there, dormant and unused, a secret superhighway waiting for a crisis. And I decided right then and there that an HOA president with a grudge against Tom Petty and a pair of pruning shears qualified as a localized disaster. Minute 3. Playing God. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The rhythmic clack, clack, clack was the only sound in the room. SSH, P2000, 222 Alex, Thompson at State, Core, RTR, Gov. The terminal prompted me for a password. I typed it in. Then the two-factor authentication key from the fob on my desk. Authentication successful. Welcome, Architect Thompson. Hello, old friend, I grinned. Now, for the fun part. Sudosu. The system prompted me again. Root password. The keys to the kingdom. Access level. Root. God mode engaged. I started typing the commands, my brain moving faster than my fingers. I was rerouting traffic on a fundamental level, performing the digital equivalent of picking up a river and moving it 2 miles to the west. Reroute traffic from subnet 10.4, 1.24. Force virtual patch from dead node 734B to GovCon Trunk 3. Create new network bridge. Assign temporary IP block from secure pool. Commit changes and push configuration live. A final prompt appeared on the screen. The system's last-ditch effort to prevent me from accidentally plunging the entire state into digital darkness. Are you sure you want to reroute critical public infrastructure to a secure government line? YN? I stared at the blinking cursor. Was I sure? Did a bear crap in the woods? Did Carol complain about the color of the sky? Was I about to become my daughter's personal hero by wielding the awesome power of the state's IT budget? I hit the Y key with a flourish and slammed the Enter key down like I was buzzing in on Jeopardy. Minute 4. The flow of data. For a second, nothing happened. The screen just blinked. My heart skipped a beat. Did I screw it up? Did I just route the school's internet traffic to a nuclear silo in Montana? And then, it happened. It started as a trickle, then became a flood. The sea of red icons on my monitor flickered. One by one, they flashed from red to amber as the new connection was established. Then, in a glorious, cascading wave, they turned green. Solid, healthy, beautiful green. Packets were flowing. Pings were returning. The school's network node, which had been a screaming red void moments before, was now pulsing with a steady, happy, verdant light. I looked at the clock on my monitor. The entire process, from the first alert to the final triumphant green light, had taken 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I leaned back in my chair, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede, and took a long, victorious sip of my now ice-cold coffee. My phone buzzed. It was another notification from the school district. UP date. Network services have been unexpectedly restored. Testing will resume in 10 minutes. We apologize for the confusion. Unexpectedly restored? I chuckled to myself. I love it. They had no idea that a guy in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt had just hot-wired their entire elementary school into a top-secret government data line from his spare bedroom. And I had a very, very strong suspicion who I had to thank for prompting this little Tuesday morning fire drill. Now, I just needed to prove it. The adrenaline from the 5-minute fix was fading, replaced by something else. Cold, calculated, righteous anger. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This wasn't a petty HOA violation. Someone had deliberately interfered with critical infrastructure during a state-mandated event affecting hundreds of children, including my own. My professional pride was offended, but my parental instincts were screaming for blood. Okay, Alex, I muttered to myself, cracking my knuckles. You're a network architect, not a private eye. But the two skill sets overlap more than you'd think. It's all about following the data, and data, unlike people, never lies. I set about gathering my evidence with the same methodical precision I used to hunt down rogue code. Step 1. The logs don't lie. I started by pulling the deep hardware logs from the ISP's regional switch that governed node 734B. The surface-level logs just showed the outage. But the deep logs, the ones that recorded every single micro-event, told the whole story. 10, 47, 12, event, service panel, 734B, access door opened. Key ID, HO, master, 1. My eyes widened. I leaned closer to the screen. Key ID, HO, master, 1. The ISP, in a misguided attempt at community cooperation, provided a master key for their junction boxes to the registered head of a local homeowners association for emergency access. I could only imagine the emergencies Carol had manufactured in her head to justify its use. A squirrel looking at her funny, probably. 10, 40, 7, 14, event. Primary fiber jack manually disconnected. 10, 47, 17, event. Catastrophic signal loss. Probable cause. Physical line severance. Bingo, I whispered. The logs were beautiful. They laid out the crime with the cold, irrefutable logic of a machine. Someone with the HOA master key opened the box, unplugged the connection, and then, presumably, went to town on it. Step 2, the missing shears. A sudden nagging thought hit me. I got up and walked to the garage, stepping over a stray power tool. I opened the door to the tall metal cabinet where Sarah kept her gardening supplies. I rummaged around. The trowel was there. The little hand rake thingy was there. The bag of organic fertilizer was there. But her favorite pair of heavy-duty pruning shears, the big ones with the red handles, the ones she said could cut through a small tree branch, was gone. We'd been looking for them for a week. Sarah blamed me. I blamed Kevin. Now, a new, much more sinister suspect entered the picture. Step 3. The all-seeing eye. This was all good, solid, circumstantial evidence. I could probably take it to the ISP, and they'd launch an internal investigation that would conclude in 6 to 8 months. I didn't have that kind of patience. I needed the slam dunk, the smoking gun, or, in this case, the smoking fiber cutters. And then I remembered. My beautiful, new 4K, HDR, night vision, motion-activated, cloud-connected security cameras. I had installed them 2 months ago. Carol, naturally, had tried to have me fined for them. She'd claimed they infringed on her right to privacy and created an atmosphere of surveillance. The fact that they were all pointed squarely at my own property, the driveway, the front door. The garage was irrelevant to her. I had to show her the printed-out schematics of my property lines to get her to back down. I grinned. "Thank you for your paranoia, Carol," I said to the empty room. I opened the security app on my main computer, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I selected the camera mounted on the corner of the garage. It had a perfect, clear, unobstructed view of my driveway, the street, and the corner of elm and maple where the little green utility box sat, nestled innocently beside Carol's award-winning petunias. I scrubbed the timeline back to 10:45 a.m. I watched the progress bar, holding my breath. And there it was. It was glorious. It was cinematic. It was clearer than a bell. The footage showed Carol, dressed in her pristine tennis whites, power walking down the sidewalk. She paused at the corner, glancing furtively up and down the street, like a spy in a low-budget movie. Seeing no one, she scurried over to the green box. She produced a key from the pocket of her tennis skirt. The HOA master key. She fumbled with the lock for a second, then the panel door swung open. She peered inside. Then, she reached into the cavernous pocket of her skirt again and pulled out my wife's bright red heavy-duty pruning shears. Son of a bitch. She leaned into the box. There was a quick, decisive movement of her hands. I couldn't see the exact snip, but I didn't need to. I knew what was happening. She shoved whatever was in her hands back into the box, slammed the door shut, locked it, and gave it a little pat. Then she tucked the shears back into her pocket, looked around one more time, and power walked away, a smug, triumphant little smile on her face. I sat back in my chair, a slow grin spreading across my own face. I downloaded the video file. I made a copy. I emailed the copy to my work address. I uploaded another copy to my secure off-site personal cloud server, the one I used for family photos and documents I'd rather not lose in a house fire. I triple-backed up a federal crime. I looked at the footage one more time, the smug smile on her face as she walked away. That was the part that sealed it. "Game," I said to the screen. "Set, match." My anger had now been replaced by a feeling of pure, unadulterated, giddy anticipation. "Your move, Carol." I took a deep breath, straightened my t-shirt, and grabbed my tablet. This was not a situation that could be resolved via text message. This required a personal touch. I walked out of my office, through the house, and out the front door. The sun was warm, birds were chirping, and the world seemed entirely too pleasant for the confrontation that was about to occur. Dave and Kevin were in the driveway, taping up the windows on the garage in preparation for the primer coat. They saw the look on my face. "Whoa, hey, boss," Dave said, lowering his roll of painter's tape. "You look like a man on a mission. Everything okay?" "Everything is fantastic, Dave," I said, my voice calm and cheerful. "Just heading over to engage in a bit of neighborhood diplomacy, a frank and open exchange of ideas with my fellow community members. You know how it is." Kevin, ever the worrier, looked towards Carol's house. "You're going over there? Dude, be careful. She might have like a poodle army or something, or laser beams." "I'll take my chances, Kevin," I said with a smile. "Some things are worth the risk." I walked with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I strode across my lawn, across the quiet suburban street, and right up Carol's perfectly laid weed-free flagstone path. Each stone was exactly the same distance apart. Of course it was. I reached her front door, a glossy black affair with a polished brass knocker in the shape of a pineapple, the symbol of hospitality, which was the richest piece of irony I'd seen all day, and I rang the doorbell. From deep within the house, Prince Flufferton III erupted in a series of frantic, hysterical yaps. A moment later, the door swung open. Carol stood there, her expression of surprise quickly curdling into her default setting of pure disdain. "What do you want?" she snapped. I gave her my best, brightest, most unthreatening smile. "Hi, Carol. Hope I'm not interrupting the prince's meditation schedule. Just had a quick question for you, if you have a moment." She crossed her arms. "I'm very busy." "I'm sure you are. It's a tough job keeping all this, harmony in check," I said, gesturing vaguely at her perfect lawn. "I was just wondering, by any chance, do you happen to know anything about the widespread internet outage at the elementary school this morning? Caused a real kerfuffle with the state testing." She scoffed, a dry, dismissive sound. "Of course not. Why would I? It's probably just more of the city's incompetence, a testament to what happens when things aren't managed properly. Unlike this neighborhood," she added with a smug sniff, which I managed to keep running perfectly. "Funny," I said, my smile not wavering. My voice was light, conversational. I held up my tablet, its screen dark. Because my security camera seems to tell a slightly different story. I tapped the screen. It lit up. I hit play. We both stood there on her pristine porch, watching the video. I angled the screen so she had a perfect view. We watched the 4K footage of her, in her tennis whites, scurrying to the utility box. We watched her produce the key. We watched her open the panel. And we watched, in glorious high definition, as she pulled out my wife's red-handled pruning shears and leaned in to do her dirty work. I let the video play out in its entirety, right up to the part where she power-walked away with that self-satisfied smirk on her face. The only sound was the tinny recording of birds chirping from the tablet's speakers and the continued, frantic yapping of Prince Flufferton from inside the house. I watched her face. It was a spectacular implosion. It moved through a full spectrum of emotion, from smug denial to utter confusion, then to dawning horror, and finally landing on a pale, blotchy, white-hot rage. She sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at the tablet. That's a fake. That's a deep fake. You're a computer hacker. I knew it. You faked that video to frame me." "Carol," I said, my voice still infuriatingly calm, "I'm a network architect, not a Hollywood VFX artist. Creating a deepfake, that convincing would take a render farm and a team of specialists. All I have is this tablet and a Wi-Fi connection. Besides," I added, tapping the screen to show the file information, "the video's metadata is time-stamped, geotagged, and cryptographically signed by the camera's firmware. It's about as real as the federal felony you just committed." I let that hang in the air for a second. Tampering with critical public utility infrastructure, especially a line serving a school during federally mandated state testing, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI get a little touchy about that sort of thing. They tend to lack a sense of humor. Her face was now a mask of pure fury. "You're threatening me. In my own home. I'm calling the police." I gave her a gentle, encouraging nod. "You should," I said. "I think that's a fantastic idea. In fact, I insist. Why don't you go right ahead? Don't worry." I gave her my most beatific smile. "I'll wait." And I did. I stood there on her porch, a silent, smiling sentinel of schadenfreude. Carol, true to her word, had slammed the door, and I assume immediately called 911. It took less than 5 minutes. The distant wail of a siren grew steadily louder until 2 police cruisers, lights flashing but sirens off, pulled up to the curb with quiet efficiency. 2 officers got out. One was older, with tired eyes and a mustache that had clearly seen 1,000 variations of this exact kind of suburban nonsense. His name tag read Miller. The other was younger, sharper, with a ramrod-straight posture and an expression that was trying very hard to be serious and authoritative. His tag read Sanchez. Before they could even get their bearings, Carol burst out of her front door, a woman possessed. "Officers! Thank God you're here," she cried, rushing towards them with a level of drama I hadn't seen since my daughter's second-grade play. "This man. She jabbed a finger at me. He's harassing me. He threatened me. He came to my home and showed me a doctored video he created with his computer hacking skills to frame me for something I didn't do." Officer Miller sighed. It was a sigh that contained multitudes. It was the sigh of a man who had been dreaming of his retirement fishing boat and was instead standing on a perfect lawn listening to a woman in tennis whites accuse her neighbor of being a cybercriminal. "Okay, ma'am. Let's all just take a breath," he said in a practiced, calming monotone. He turned to me. Sir, can you tell me your side of the story? I walked calmly down the path to meet them on the sidewalk. Good morning, officers. Alex Thompson. I live right across the street, I said, gesturing with my thumb. I made sure to keep my hands visible, my posture relaxed. I'm the one who called in the initial complaint to the ISP about the outage. The outage at the school? Officer Sanchez asked, his interest piqued. We heard about that on the radio. Caused a bit of a mess. They said the internet just came back on by itself? I allowed myself a small smile. It did. That's because I rerouted the entire school's network traffic through a secure state government disaster recovery line. I did it from my home office over there. I paused to let that sink in. My job is senior network architect for the state of, for the state. I pulled out my wallet and handed them my state-issued ID. That was the moment the entire dynamic shifted. Officer Miller took the ID, his tired expression flickering with genuine interest. He looked from the ID to me and back again. Officer Sanchez's eyes widened slightly. The air of a mundane neighbor dispute evaporated, replaced by something much more serious. This wasn't about a loud radio or an ugly truck anymore. The outage wasn't an accident, I continued, my voice level and factual. The fiber optic line in that utility box over there, I pointed to the green box, was physically severed this morning. Carol, as the HOA president, I believe you have a master key for that box for emergency purposes, is that correct? All eyes turned to Carol. She stammered, yes, for legitimate emergencies, but... And I have security footage. I cut her off, my tone still polite. Of you, Carol, using that key, opening that box, and cutting that cable with a pair of pruning shears at exactly 10:47 a.m., the precise time of the outage. I also have the server logs from the ISP switch showing a manual disconnect event logged to your key ID. I still have the video right here. I held up the tablet. Would you like to see? The officers exchanged a look. Yes, sir, Officer Miller said, his voice now formal. We would. I handed the tablet over. They huddled together, watching the video on the hood of their cruiser as I stood back. I saw them zoom in on Carol's face, on the red-handled shears, on the smug look as she walked away. After a long minute, Officer Miller looked up, his face an unreadable mask of professional calm. He turned to Carol, who was now looking less like an accuser and more like a cornered animal. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat and devoid of any previous boredom. Is this you in the video? It's a trick, she insisted, her voice cracking. He's a hacker. He's manipulating you. Officer Miller's patience finally snapped, just a little. Ma'am, I'm going to be very clear with you. Tampering with critical communications infrastructure is not a simple vandalism charge. It is a federal offense, a very, very serious one. We are far beyond a simple neighborhood disagreement here. So I need you to be completely truthful with me right now. Did you, or did you not, cut that cable? Carol's face crumpled. The intricate web of lies, arrogance, and entitlement she had woven around herself collapsed in an instant. Her shoulders slumped. A choked sob escaped her lips. She didn't have to say a word. Her silence was a confession. Officer Sanchez had already unclipped his handcuffs. Officer Miller politely asked if I wouldn't mind waiting on my own property while they concluded their business. I told him it would be my absolute pleasure. I retreated to my front porch, went inside to pour myself a fresh, hot cup of coffee, and came back out to my favorite chair, settling in to watch the final act of the tragicomedy. From across the street, Dave and Kevin had completely stopped any pretense of working. They were leaning against the garage, arms crossed, watching the drama unfold with expressions of undisguised glee. It was better than cable. I couldn't hear the exact words being exchanged, but the body language was a universal language that needed no translation. I sipped my coffee and provided my own internal color commentary. And now we see Officer Miller adopting the classic, calm, disappointed dad posture, a very effective technique. Carol is attempting a counter move, the hysterical arm-waving gambit, but it's not landing. Her credibility is shot. Officer Sanchez, meanwhile, is doing a masterful job of just standing there, looking official and holding a pair of handcuffs. The psychological pressure is immense. Carol is visibly crumbling. She's going through the 5 stages of grief in about 90 seconds flat. There's denial, waving her arms at my house. There's anger, stabbing a finger in my direction. Here comes bargaining. She's clasping her hands together as if in prayer. And yes, there it is. The shoulders are slumping into depression. Any second now. We'll reach the final stage. And there it was, a grim, tearful acceptance. Officer Sanchez stepped forward gently, turned Carol around, and with a series of quiet, efficient clicks, secured her hands behind her back. My jaw almost dropped. I expected a citation, a fine, a stern warning. I did not expect a full-blown arrest. They led her, sobbing, to the back of one of the cruisers. One of the officers actually had to hold the door for her as she awkwardly tried to get in with her hands behind her back. Prince Flufferton III, who had been a constant yapping soundtrack to the whole affair, was now scratching frantically at the inside of her front window. The cruiser door shut. The show was over. From my garage, Dave let out a long, low whistle of pure astonishment. Kevin, less restrained, was pumping his fist in the air like he'd just watched his team win the Super Bowl. "Yes! Justice!" he whispered, shouted across the lawn. Then, something else happened. My neighbor to the left, Mr. Henderson, a quiet retiree who Carol had once tried to fine for possession of a tacky garden gnome, came out onto his porch. He caught my eye, raised his coffee mug in a silent toast, and gave me a slow, deeply respectful nod. I took a long, slow sip of my coffee. It was, without exaggeration, the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted in my entire life. It tasted like high-speed data packets, processed justice, and the sweet, sweet sound of a problem taking care of itself in a way that far exceeded my wildest expectations. The news of Carol's perp walk in tennis whites spread through the neighborhood faster than a gossip-fueled Wi-Fi signal. By mid-afternoon, the police cars were long gone. A bewildered man who introduced himself as Carol's brother-in-law, for my sins, had arrived to collect a still yapping Prince Flufferton. The street was quiet, but the neighborhood was buzzing. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mr. Henderson, holding a 6-pack of a fancy-looking craft IPA. "I don't know the whole story, son," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "And frankly, I don't need to. All I know is that my garden gnome, Gnorman, can now stand proud on my lawn without fear of persecution. This is for you." He handed me the beer. "From both of us." He was just the first. Throughout the afternoon, my front door became a revolving door of relieved neighbors. Mrs. Gable, from 2 doors down, brought over a still warm apple pie, confessing that Carol had tried to get the HOA to ban trampolines because they were a visual disruption to the skyline. The young couple from the corner house dropped off a bottle of wine, laughing as they recounted how Carol had tried to shut down their 7-year-old's lemonade stand for operating without a commercial food license. It was an outpouring of communal relief. I was no longer just Alex, the quiet computer guy. I was a liberator, the hero of Grige Gardens. Dave and Kevin were packing up their tools for the day, their work on the garage far from finished, but their spirits impossibly high. "Kid, I gotta tell ya," Dave said, shaking his head in wonder as he loaded a ladder into his truck. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been yelled at, I've had checks bounce, I've had dogs bite me. But I have never, ever, in my entire career, had a client get the HOA president arrested for what basically amounts to domestic terrorism. That's a first. You're a legend." Kevin was practically vibrating with excitement. "It was so awesome. You were like, 'I see your complaint, and I raise you a federal charge. You're like a superhero. Your superpower is like super fast Wi-Fi." I grinned, picking up a stray piece of painter's tape from the driveway. "With great bandwidth comes great responsibility, Kevin," I said sagely. He nodded, as if I had just imparted a piece of ancient wisdom. It was a strange feeling. I hadn't set out to be a hero. I just wanted to finish my home lab, help my daughter with her tests, and be left alone. but in standing up to Carol's particular brand of tyrannical pettiness. I had accidentally become a symbol of freedom for a cul-de-sac full of people who were just tired of being told their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. And I had to admit, it felt pretty damn good. The next day was all about dealing with the official fallout, which was far less dramatic, but, in its own way, just as amusing. My first call was from my boss, Susan, a no-nonsense woman who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. "Alex," she said, her voice flat and businesslike over the phone, "I have a priority. One report on my desk from our primary ISP partner, an official inquiry statement from the Harmony Creek Police Department, and a very confusing but grateful email from the superintendent of the Northwood School District. They all seem to have your name prominently featured. Do you want to tell me why you apparently hot-wired a public elementary school into the state's secure government continuity trunk without a single work order or authorization?" I took a deep breath. "Well, Susan, it's a funny story. It all started with a very sensitive toaster. I gave her the whole story. The server rack, Carol, the poodle's meditation, the noise complaint, the ominous threat, the severed cable, the 5-minute fix, the security camera footage, the arrest." There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing. For a moment I thought my career was over. Then, she spoke. "Let me get this straight. The entire school district's network connectivity was taken down by a woman with a pair of pruning shears because your contractor's radio was playing Tom Petty too loud?" "That about sums it up, yes," I confirmed. There was another pause. And then, a sound I had never heard before. Susan, the Iron Lady of the state IT department, broke out laughing. A full, genuine laugh. "Okay, Thompson," she said after she'd recovered. "Don't you ever do something like that again without telling me first. You understand? The paperwork is a nightmare." "Understood," I said. "But also," she added, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "nice work. Really, really nice work. I'm submitting your rerouting solution as a case study for our next statewide disaster recovery drill. I'm calling it the Poodle Protocol." The rest of the day was a blur of similar conversations. The principal of Northwood Elementary called to thank me so profusely, I thought he was going to offer me a teaching position. Apparently, Lily was now a minor celebrity in the 3rd grade, the kid whose dad turned the internet back on with his computer magic. She was loving it. My final stop was the police station to give a formal, signed statement. Officer Miller was there, looking much less tired than the day before. He filled me in on the details. Carol was facing a delightful cocktail of state and federal charges, including felony destruction of property and the big one, tampering with a public utility. Her expensive lawyer was apparently trying to build a case for temporary insanity caused by acute neighborhood disruption syndrome. I had to physically bite my cheek to keep from laughing out loud in the middle of the police station. A few weeks later, a new, calmer era dawned on our street. Carol, facing the very real possibility of prison time, had accepted a plea bargain that involved her paying a series of massive fines to the ISP and the school district, performing hundreds of hours of community service, and best of all, selling her house and leaving the neighborhood as a condition of her probation. We watched the moving truck come and go with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The HOA, leaderless and in disarray, was quickly reformed by a council of relieved neighbors, with the newly empowered Mr. Henderson elected as president. Their first official act was to unanimously abolish the mythical Serenity Mandate and pass a new bylaw declaring that all shades of blue for municipal recycling bins were not only acceptable, but celebrated for their diversity. Their second was to officially recognize Norman, the garden gnome, as the neighborhood's official mascot. My project was finally complete. The garage was painted, the door frame was repaired, and inside, against the far wall, my server rack stood, fully populated and humming away with a quiet, efficient whir. The blinking lights were a symphony of perfectly functioning technology. Dave and Kevin came by to do a final walkthrough and pick up their final check. "Well, kid," Dave said, giving the humming rack a respectful pat. "It's done. Looks impressive. Have fun with your super toaster." Kevin looked at me with genuine admiration. Seriously, man. If you ever need help fighting any more supervillains, you have my number. I'm pretty good with a paint roller. It could be like my weapon. I laughed and shook their hands, promising to call if any international spies moved in next door. That evening, I was sitting in my office, my command center, basking in the glow of my monitors. The door opened, and Sarah came in, followed by Lily. Sarah leaned against the door frame, a small smile on her face. "So," she said, looking at the rack of blinking lights in the garage via the security feed, then back at me. "Was it all worth it? The dust? The noise? The felony on our street?" Lily ran over and gave me a hug. "Everyone at school still says my dad is a computer wizard," she said proudly. "And I got an A on my tests." I pulled her onto my lap and looked at Sarah. I thought about the absurdity of it all, the rage, the poodle, the shears, the 5 minutes of frantic coding that had changed our quiet street forever. "A wizard?" I said, ruffling Lily's hair. "Nah, I'm just a guy with good security cameras and a very, very low tolerance for nonsense." I swiveled in my chair, turned to my keyboard, and typed a quick command. House, lights, living room, dim, level 50. The lights in the main house dimmed to a soft, warm glow. Lily gasped in delight. Sarah just shook her head, still smiling. In the end, I guess Carol was right about one thing. Some things can be disrupted pretty easily, but as long as guys like me are watching the network, they can be put back together even faster. Especially when there's a good story in it.